it seems like when you get here that it's like meditation or something like that, because everybody's sitting in silence, and so you might think of it like Buddhist meditation, but it's not the same. It's the idea of everybody there waiting on God to send a message to them, either privately or corporately.
The meeting for worship is really an opportunity to strip away distractions that might get in the way of making that connection. And so you're going to be in a very simple space. You're going to be in a space that's simple, not only in appearance, but it's also quiet.
You're sitting in silence, and you're all equally responsible for getting something out of the quiet.
My name is Ian Hansen. I was originally born in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, though I spent a lot of my life living in Lancaster, Pennsylvania, and some early part of my life living in New Zealand and in California too.
My name is Christopher Kimberly. I was born in Boston, and I grew up in North Jersey.
I'm Priscilla Taylor Williams. Actually, I'm originally from the West Coast.
John Egminster. I was born in a little town outside San Francisco, California. And I lived in California up until the time I was 27.
My name is Robert Baldridge. I was born here in New York City.
Were you raised Quaker?
No, I was raised in a family that was fairly unreligious, but Presbyterian, and kind of stumbled into Quakerism at the end of my college experience.
Probably when I was about 2, my mom went to every sort of church and sort of religious place in Santa Fe, New Mexico, to see what she could stand or comfortable in. And she liked the Quaker meetings, so I did grow up after that in Quaker meeting.
I was not raised a Quaker, but an atheist agnostic, and I was a midlife convert to Quakerism. Age 45 would have been 1988. I came here when my first child was still small, feeling the need of a spiritual community to raise my child in. And this was my home. I recognized it very quickly that this was a good place to be.
I was not raised Quaker, actually. I was not raised with any religion. I think the first Quaker meeting I went to, I might have been about 7 or 8 years old. I don't think I started going regularly to Quaker meeting until I was in college. I went to a Quaker college, went to Swarthmore, and I think I went to a couple of the meetings, but they didn't speak to me when I first went. But later on, as life became more complicated, I started to go more regularly.
My mother's Jewish, and my father is Christian. So my mother and my father did not want us to be forced into any particular religious belief. We were taken to many different experiences, but I decided to join the Religious Society of Friends when I was 11 years old, and that was in 1968.
How would you describe meeting for worship to someone who's never experienced it?
So I usually, and I actually get a chance to do that a lot, so I usually start by explaining one of the core beliefs of Quakerism is that there's that of God in every person, and that if you believe that that's true, then connecting with that inner light is a big part of what meeting for worship is, and to do so in community amplifies the strength of that experience. And so meeting for worship is really an opportunity to strip away distractions that might get in the way of making that connection. And so you're going to be in a very simple space. You're going to be in a space that's simple, not only in appearance, but it's also quiet. And then it's also a place where members of the community can share whatever message they're moved to share in light of that.
It always starts with silence, and there are times when over the period of the 50 or 60 minutes, it's usually 60 minutes that people are worshiping, it is in silence. Sometimes it's totally in silence, and other times there are people that give messages.
You're sitting in silence, and you're all equally responsible for getting something out of the quiet.
Mm-hmm.
And your goal is to connect to the deepest source of your own spiritual life, and possibly share insight.
Gathered in silence to wait on visitations from God and God's operation on our hearts to make us more forgiving and loving and sinless. And we Quakers gathered together feeling that it was God's will, not just that we listen for the voice and guidance of God individually, but also together.
So, meeting for worship is, it seems like when you get here that it's like meditation or something like that, because everybody's sitting in silence, and so you might think of it like Buddhist meditation, but it's not the same. It's the idea of everybody there waiting on God to send a message to them, either privately or corporately. And if it's private, then you just sit there quietly with your message and try to discern what it means and how you're supposed to act on it. And if you get a message that's supposed to be spoken, then that's a potentially a very, very interesting experience.
And how would you describe your own experience in meetings? Would you describe it differently?
No, I think all people, if they're being honest, there are days when you can easily settle into that silence once you get familiar with it, and days when it's quite challenging, and you're either you're worried about something that you go over and over, knowing that that's not really useful, or you can't get past your grocery list and the things to do. But most of the time, just from years of practice, it's like any form of meditative experience. You can settle in. And usually I think most people have some tool that they personally use to kind of settle in. And then, I don't know, it's like skating. It's like this really great sort of like free-flowing awareness of something.
It is very much a personal experience, a chance for reflection, for meditation, for inspiration when I hear messages from others. And sometimes, actually, frankly, if it's been a busy day or a complicated week, it can be difficult for me to do any of that. And so I'm distracted and thinking about what it is that I need to do to be ready for Monday or whatever.
When I come to meeting for worship, I'm often struggling to stay still. I'm often fidgeting a little bit, or I get tired, and so when I feel years and years after coming here, I still haven't mastered that ability to stay still, and I hear that from a lot of friends, actually. But there are occasions when someone will say something in meeting for worship that'll hit me in just the right place, and it's just what I needed to hear at that moment, and I'll be, it'll kind of change my day.
I may get to say something that strengthens someone else or brings love, joy, and encouragement to somebody else. I may bring problems to somebody else. Or I may just sit quietly, whatever the Lord wills.
For me, my experience is that there's a phrase that I learned from someone who said that the gift is the present. Being present is the gift. So my experience is to wait, to observe, to go inside to a deeper place where I can get in touch with the God in each of us. Now that is about emptying the mind, being open, and allowing the Spirit to fill me and hopefully the room. So in a sense, it's not about one person, but it's about developing a sense of the whole.
And why do you think speaking is important for the experience of meeting? Oh.
I think because you're actually, it forces you to take responsibility for something deeper. and genuinely take responsibility for that thought. It's like a poet writing a good poem. You owe something to the experience, right? And you owe something to your meeting to share it. And if you really believe that there's a spiritual impulse, you're shepherding it into reality. So I think you have to speak even when you don't want to. The only time I can remember one time when I successfully did not speak in meeting, and I was miserable, really miserable the whole week. Like I really felt that I'd failed something and hadn't lived, like there was something important that was supposed to be said and I didn't say it. So another experience the Quakers will describe, call it a gathered meeting, but somebody will stand up and say something, and you'll find out later that many people were thinking that thing. And sometimes, sometimes when I'm arguing, I haven't said that, and then somebody else says it. And it's like, whoa, okay, it was supposed to be said, I passed it up, somebody else did it. Thank goodness somebody else did it, because it was clearly important.
Why do I think speaking is important to meeting? I guess insofar as there are messages that are to be shared with others, to the extent that you can reach out to people who, for whatever reason, they can't hear what they're being told, maybe individually by God, or there are things that need to be understood as everybody hearing and as everybody grappling with. I think that's what speaking and meeting is for. It's for that shared message. And sometimes it's not even something that everybody in meeting is supposed to grapple with, or it's not necessarily going to touch everyone in meeting, but it'll touch one particular person in meeting who needs to be spoken to in that way. And somebody told a story about how they felt this need to deliver a message in French, and they thought it was very strange to talk in French because it didn't seem like anyone was speaking French around them. And then afterwards, somebody in the meeting who spoke French came up to them and said, "Wow, I felt so included by. I was really touched by what you said." So, and that's you hear stories like that a lot.
Well, for a few reasons. One is that I think for Quakerism to really work, it has to be an inclusive process. And so no matter your age, no matter your gender, no matter your background, no matter your experience, everyone has something to offer in that environment. And if some people feel that they can't speak, then the group itself is lacking. I think another reason why is that if you don't go into meeting feeling like you might, not that you will, but there's the potential that you might need to step up to the plate and share something, I think there's a risk that you go into that passively, and that you're going in there to check out rather than to check in. And so whether or not you speak, to know that there may be a potential that you will, I think is really important.
Things are said that really nourish us, and we don't hear them out in the world. We don't hear them on TV. We don't read them in the newspaper. We maybe get them when someone who loves us kisses us and says, "I love you." But we don't get very many of those nourishing words. And that's what gathering and meeting is for. And when it works, it really works.